All right, guys, we are going to begin, and this week we are going into Luke 5. We're going to wrap up Luke 4 and go into Luke 5 on this series through Luke, when Jesus goes deeper and then takes us with. Sorry to end the sentence there in a preposition, but I did because I wanted to, all right? So I have been getting phone calls from the most maliciously designed phone call services. They come from Florida, they come from different, and they're in high definition, and I need a volunteer that will act this out with me. Who will? And it's important that you don't know what you're going to do in order for it to work. You know, everyone looked at you, so come on. Come on up. Okay, now my glasses are my phone. Now you come over here. Oh, you're a dork. All right. So, now you have to pretend pretend this is a real phone call.
I'm gonna smile the whole time.
Get your phone out, man. Get your phone.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Who is this?
Well, do you have a second to talk?
Who's calling?
Great! Okay, I want to tell you that you won a vacation to Disney World! So, thank you. Demonstration over. So, 3 times I got calls like that, and all 3 times I was fooled. I was like, no, I think it's a real person this time. It's not a real person. It's high definition. They sound so personable. And that's what we call in marketing throwing bread out on the water. You're trying to trick somebody into something. Now, do those calls take and if you can mute your phone, that'd be awesome. Sorry about that. Would appreciate that. It's my wife. That's why I'm really calling her out. Please stop. Thank you. All right. All right. So is there somebody on the other end of that? Is there somebody stealing my Aunt Pat's credit card on the other end of that? That's what I wonder about. What are those people about? But when we used to go to Knott's Berry Farm last year, I said we used to go because we don't have our passes again this year. We always would park by the water park, Soak City. Yeah, if you've not been to Knott's in a while, you may not know this, that there's a replica building of Independence Hall. It is really cool, really awesome, right there on Knott's property, along with 220 chickens that are just loose. And that's the actual number given to us by the guy who knew the number, because we met him one day. And he was like, yeah, there's probably 220 chickens around here. And I was like, 220, wow. And our kids named them all. Help me with some of the names. There's Chicky Chicky Parm Parm. That's one of them. Chicken Nugget, yeah.
Chicken Parmesan.
And then Chicken Divan. If I see a really brilliantly colored one, I'll say Chicken Divan, all right?
All the boys are Daddy Chicken, Uncle Chicken.
That's right.
Great Daddy Chicken.
Well, and the other thing we love to do, aside from the chickens, is to go up to the artificial, river that's right there, because it's full of turtles and carp, and we will throw bread out on the water or chips out on the water, whatever it is. But it's one of those deals where there's a fence there and you can't access the water, right? One time Lucy climbed up and was leaning over, and my heart just stopped, because if she would have gone over the fence, she would have fallen in the water. And so I've been thinking about that, and I've been thinking about that a lot with how we view discipleship. And discipleship is a totally Christian word. It's a spiritual word. It's a word that turns people off. But I want to make an assertion right now that if you understood what discipleship is, and I'm right about this, so listen, the greatest thing you could ever do in life is disciple somebody. I think it's the greatest thing you could ever do in life. Probably in the church, we resist this more than anything. We put discipleship on clergy or paid staff. No, not me. And it's actually the coolest thing. It's the reason why Friday Night Lights is one of the all-time favorite television shows in television history. If you did not know that, it's actually one of the shows considered on the list of was it a perfect show, because the entire 5 seasons of that show is about discipleship. Everything in that show, if you watch the show, in fact, the first season they scream it at you. There's so many spiritual analogies to discipleship. They don't use the word, but the way the coach works, the way the leaders in the community work, the way the players work with one another, because it's about football in Texas, it's about discipleship. Every Rocky movie ever is about discipleship. Did you know that? I mean, even the bad Rocky, Rocky 5, the one that everybody hates, has this awesome moment where Rocky is remembering Mickey, and Mickey is yelling at him, "Get up, bum! Get up, you bum, and fight, because Mickey loves you." And when that line comes through, it's like, give me cold chills right now. It's so powerful because you just watched, for all these Rocky movies, this really great relationship between Mickey and Rocky that discipled Rocky and made him the man that he is. And then the incredible thing about Creed is the movie Creed taps into that whole narrative. Now, Rocky is the older Mickey, right? Who's reaching. Mickey was from one culture, Rocky from another. Adonis Creed is from one culture, Rocky from another. And Rocky's now in Creed's. There's this one great moment where they go into a gym and these guys are using the mitts and they're doing boxing rhythms, and it kind of throws Adonis Creed off, and he looks over at Rocky and says, "I don't want to train with these guys, I want to train with you." And Rocky kind of pops on him and he says, "Look, I can't do that. I can't do the mitts the way they're doing it. I can't move the way they're moving. I need you to do this with them, but I am watching you, and I'm with you." In other words, I'm with you. I'm not bailing on you. I'm with you. I love you. And that is how Creed trains in order for his heavyweight fight, which he fights. And I'm going to give the end away. Though he loses the fight, everybody that watches the film knows it's a huge win. It's a picture of discipleship, all right? And Jesus is pitching his hometown in this passage, as we covered the last couple weeks, on the way he wants to view making disciples and starting his kingdom and building a movement. He wants to go to the PCBO, right? The poor, the captive, the blind, the oppressed. He wants to go to the most broken people, the PCBO, poor, captive, blind, oppressed people, and he wants to proclaim to them it's the favorable year of the Lord. And what he's doing when he does that, which is another point that we can make, is he's obligating everybody within his presence to invest in. Because if you ever make an impact, like when we had Nomad really exploding in 2010 at Westchester Park, I started coming back up here and I started asking, guys, I need help. And y'all showed up and helped me. And sometimes it overwhelmed folks, and sometimes people found a lot of fun going on there, because when you're ministering to needy people, it's very hard and it's very challenging. And a lot of folks, they just don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. They don't want to make that risk, and they don't want to do it. And that's what happens to Jesus. Remember, his people wanted to throw him off a cliff. Not a metaphor. When they heard these things, all in the synagogue were filled with wrath, and they rose up and drove him out of the town and brought him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so that they could throw him down the cliff. But Jesus did this. Passing through their midst, he went away. My favorite one's coming up. This is it. Look, he's on the cliff. That's it. I wondered, maybe he walked down the cliff, and that's why they didn't see him. Isn't that awesome? All right. So to go back to it, it goes on, because then Jesus goes to, come on up for me, Scripture. He goes to Capernaum, and I'm not going to read this whole passage, but you remember when he goes to Capernaum, they were astonished at his teaching. An unclean spirit rose up, and instead instead of Jesus feeling like the unclean spirits were grabbing him to throw him off a cliff, he got to deal with the unclean spirit right there in the synagogue. He casts that unclean spirit out. The demon throws the dude down, but then he had experienced no harm. It was a huge, awesome thing. And now we're now caught up to the story of where we're going to pick up today. They were all amazed in Capernaum and said to one another, "What is this word? For with authority and power Jesus commands the unclean spirits, and they come out." And reports about him went out into every place in the surrounding region. Now I want to pitch you on something real quick. I thought a lot about this after last week, and I want to give a praise real quick. And you guys may not know this, but Joe and Alicia were huge encouragements in us live casting the teaching last week, which we've never done, not in 10 years, right? I thought maybe 30 people would watch it, okay? I really did, because for my 42 miler, about 30 people watched every one of the little videos that I put up. And that really got me pumped. I didn't think anybody would watch it, and then everybody was watching it. And then I had one that had a little more than that. I got a lot of donations, and that inspired me and excited me. Well, by the end of the day last Sunday, 160 people had watched it, and I panicked, and I took the video down. And because I didn't think more than 30 would watch it. And Amanda comes in. She comes into the front room at our house. "Huddle, where is that video? Get that video up." And then Ken and I calls me on the phone. He's like, "Hey, John, I think it's a good idea to keep that video up." Probably don't want to take that down. So I did put it up the next morning, and since then, over 420 people have watched the video, so praise God for that, man. And I never would have done it if you guys wouldn't have encouraged me to do it, all right? So I thought that was a huge win. And we're talking about this really gnarly stuff, and that's one of the reasons why I panicked. And two pastors, Jason Tippett and Adam Edgerly, talked to me on the phone and encouraged me to keep the video up. And both of them said, Johnny, we think that there are people out there who are not in the church who are actually way more pumped and excited to access deeper spiritual stuff than anyone in the church gives them credit for. And I believe that that's true. And so one of the things I do want to say about unclean spirits is this. An unclean spirit is real. And because we've turned relationships into a form of entertainment, all right, through our telephones, and not an actual real community that we live in, it has distanced us from people. Sometimes we think we've seen something in one of these apps or one of these social groups, and we think that we've learned something about them. But what we've done is we've engaged the entertainment part of our brain, and we've observed something that we can comment on from a distance. And that is not how discipleship gets done. Discipleship will bring you into intimate space with somebody or personal space, and you are going to see the ugly stuff. And they're going to see your stuff too. Half of us, we don't want to see anything in anybody else. The other half of us, we don't want anybody seeing anything in us. And that is what keeps us from experiencing the kind of community that each one of us is dying to have in our lives. And you know it. You want it and you know it. Instead, we trick around, being driven by our desires, looking for this, looking for that. And the most awesome thing we could be doing, guys, is just loving each other regularly. Not just spontaneously in the line at Target, but intentionally and regularly. And when the world tries to rip us away and keep us from that space, we fight against that because we love each other. And we want to be in that space together. That is what it's all about. So he leaves the synagogue, cast out that demon. Or the unclean spirit. They're all amazed. And the next thing that happens is Jesus arose and left the synagogue and he entered Simon's house. This is Simon Peter's house. Now Simon's mother-in-law was ill with a high fever and they appealed to him on her behalf. So he stood over her, rebuked the fever. Basically he said, get out of her fever. Or he talked trash to the fever. Or he told the fever to get lost, and it left her. And immediately she rose and began to serve them. Now, look, I'm not going to pull the text this way and put all my points. I'm just going to say them right now, all right? Number one thing, one of the things Jesus desires to do when he heals you is to set you free to live out the function that he's designed for you. And that's exactly what happens to Simon Peter's mom, right? She gets healed and does what? Does whatever she wants now. She rises up and began to serve them. That's what she wanted to do. There was something keeping her from doing what God had called her to do, and that's why she wanted to be healed, and most likely, that's why she had fans showing up begging Jesus to heal her. Man, Jesus, this mother-in-law is awesome. She, dude, if you heal her, I'm telling you, man, she just wants she wants the movement to continue. She wants to see the blind, the poor, the broken, the oppressed reached. Heal her, Jesus. We got a winner in her. She's got our back. Jesus does it. She rises up and she serves them. Next thing happens. It's a beautiful image, and Luke will drop these every once in a while. Now, when the sun was setting, just get that image too, like right now, it's west that way, if the sun was setting. All those who had any who were sick with various diseases brought them to Jesus, and he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. And demons also came out of many, crying, "You are the Son of God." But he rebuked them and would not allow them to speak because they knew that he was the Christ. And this is, I usually when I teach this story is from the Mark chapter 1 story. Many of you have done my time management stuff. You know that it's like one of my life stories. Is that Jesus does an all-night healing session here. The whole city was gathered at the door. That's what Mark says. The whole city was gathered at the door, right? And he's just healing everybody, setting everybody free to serve, everybody free to love, everybody free to act. He's doing it, he's doing it, he's doing it. And then the next morning he wakes up and he doesn't do it. He goes to a lonely place. And in that place, he gets alone. He prays to God. God restores to him what he's supposed to be doing. And that's addressed a little bit right here. When it was day, he departed and went into a desolate place. And the people sought him and came to him and would have kept him from leaving them. But he said to them, I must preach the good news of the kingdom of God to the other towns as well. For I was sent for this purpose. And he was preaching in the synagogues of Judea. Now we're going to come back to the text in a little bit, but now I kind of want to talk about what's happened so far, all right? I'm going to argue one big thing, that the healings, as well as teaching in the synagogue, as well as Jesus talking to people and interacting with them, all of those things are important when you're proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom. When you hear that phrase, what does it mean to proclaim the gospel? The word gospel means good news. So what does it mean to proclaim the good news of the kingdom? Well, it means to teach from a pulpit. Well, no, not just that. Well, it doesn't mean teach, it's the healing part. Well, no, it's not just that. It's all of these things. And all of these things working together. And we know that because when he goes to all these other towns, he tries to do all of these things. That's why he grieves in Galilee. Remember that? He grieves in Galilee because he says to them what he thinks they're thinking, and he's right. That's why they get so angry. You're probably thinking in your heads, hey, prophet, heal yourself. Well, let me tell you what I think about you. And he lets them know what he thinks about them. He compares them to people in the Old Testament who forced Elisha and Elijah and some of the other prophets to go way out into the boonies to find anybody that would believe or have faith or trust or whatever. That's what Jesus is doing here. Is he is doing all three things everywhere he goes. And then it brings him to one of my favorite stories in the whole New Testament. This is it. On one occasion, in Luke 5, while the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. And he saw two boats by the lake. But the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people from the boat. This is the beginning of one of the most awesome moments in Jesus' whole ministry. Because this is the thing that's going to crack open the beginning of the disciples being gathered in and being called disciples, all right? But it starts with this moment. And what I love about this, and I'm going to get kind of poetic for a second. We're going to look at a poem, then we're going to look at a piece of short fiction. But just brief, but just two examples is, I love the image of Jesus going into their territory. He's getting into a boat and he's on the water. And he's out there on the water. And these fishermen are all, they're all bringing their nets and they're all calling it quits. So do you see the traffic getting crossed here? They're coming in, he's going out, right? It's kind of a cool image. And everything is set up for something awesome to happen here. But Jesus is always looking for opportunities in every situation to reveal something that's hidden, to bring something out that is that's what John 1:14 says. We behold him. One of y'all can quote this faster than I can quote this. It just went out of me. In him was grace and truth. We beheld him, the only begotten Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. I may be misquoting that a little bit, but what that means is he didn't keep himself a secret. He revealed himself to people. He wasn't one of these gurus walking around giving you little bit, little that, little bit. He was transparent with everyone. But then in Mark 4 he says, I speak in parables to those outside so they don't understand, because his goal is for those who are outside to hear the parables and want more and to come inside to be closer to Jesus, where they're going to understand. They're going to hear the teaching. They're going to hear the stories. They're going to see the man. They're going to experience the healings, and they're going to understand that, wow, this is the new thing. This is the new thing. So there's a great collection of short fiction, kind of non-fiction short fiction called The Things They Carry by Tim O'Brien. Anybody have to read this in college? I know Amanda did. And I want to read you a passage from it. Tim O'Brien was a Vietnam vet. He actually uses his own name in the book as Tim O'Brien, so he's a character in the book. That's why it's a little fishy. Is this true? Is it not true? He wrote a lot of stuff about Vietnam. But this is a short passage about what it was like being a soldier in Vietnam. And he cooks it all down to one thing. It really comes down to the things that they had to carry. All the stuff that they had to carry. Let me read it to you right now. The things they carried were largely determined by necessity. Among the necessities or near necessities were P38 can openers, pocket knives, heat tabs, wristwatches, dog tags, mosquito repellent, chewing gum, candy, cigarettes, salt tablets, packets of Kool-Aid. lighters, matches, sewing kits, military payment certificates, sea rations, and 2 or 3 canteens of water. Together, these items weighed between 15 and 20 pounds, depending upon a man's habits or rate of metabolism. Henry Dobbins, who was a big man, carried extra rations. He was especially fond of canned peaches and heavy syrup over pound cake. Dave Jensen, who practiced field hygiene, carried a toothbrush, dental floss, and several hotel-sized bars of soap he'd stolen on R&R in Sydney, Australia. Ted Lavender, who was scared, carried tranquilizers until he was shot in the head outside the village of Tangkay in mid-April. By necessity, and because it was SOP, they all carried steel helmets that weighed 5 pounds, including the liner and camouflage cover. They carried the standard fatigue jackets and trousers. Very few carried underwear. On their feet, they carried jungle boots, 2.1 pounds, and Dave Jensen carried 3 pairs of socks and a can of Dr. Scholl's foot powder as a precaution against trench foot. Until he was shot, Ted Lavender carried 6 or 7 ounces of premium dope, which for him was a necessity. Mitchell Sanders, the RTO, carried condoms. Norman Bowker carried a diary. Rat Kiley carried comic books. Kiowa, a devout Baptist, carried an illustrated New Testament that had been presented to him by his father, who taught Sunday school in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. As a hedge against bad times, however, Kiowa also carried his grandmother's distrust of the white man, his grandfather's old hunting hatchet. Necessity dictated. Because the land was mined and booby-trapped, it was SOP for each man to carry a steel-centered, nylon-covered flak jacket, which weighed 6.7 pounds, but which on hot days seemed much heavier. Because you could die so quickly, each man carried at least 1 large compressed bandage, usually in the helmet band, for easy access. Because the nights were cold and because the monsoons were wet, each carried a green plastic poncho that could be used as a raincoat or ground sheet or makeshift tent. With its quilted liner, the poncho weighed almost 2 pounds, but was worth every ounce. In April, for instance, when Ted Lavender was shot, they used his poncho to wrap him up, then to carry him across the paddy, then to lift him into the chopper that took him away. That's the opening of this great story, which then from here goes deeper into each of these characters' lives until the things they carried are sorrow and pain and trauma and stress, and it's mounting and mounting and mounting on top of them, and the narrator's sentences get longer. Remember, the rule with the sentences, the longer it gets, the more speed it gathers, all right? So it's going and it's going, and it's this like this narrative cry. Can you see these people? Can you see what they had to go through? Can you see their burden? And while the fishermen are coming in and Jesus is going out, that's the kind of moment that you're having right now, as Jesus is about to reveal exactly to everybody that he sees them and he sees all that they have to carry. All right? And seeing things is special, man. When we go to Knott's Berry Farm, to go back to that again, I get so excited when I see turtles about to come to the surface of the water. Because I love turtles. I had a pet turtle growing up, Timmy the turtle. Named him after my cousin, Timmy. All right? Very creative. Well, my mentor, Bridget, wrote a wonderful poem called Windfall. And I meant to, it's one word, Windfall. It was published in the Kenyon Review if you want to read it. And I'm not going to read you the whole thing. It's too long. But I want to read you the last stanza, and I want to summarize the story. Pretty much it was a true story. She used to go to this park called Allerton Park out there in Champaign County. Where there was a pond out there and a bunch of statues that some rich guy put out there and then died, you know. And now it's a park that everybody can go and see, and I should have probably researched the history of Allerton better than I am right now. She used to go there with Mac, her son, and many people, but she'd go there with Mac, and they would walk the park. And it's a it's a beautiful place. But there was a pond that she would go to, and one day she saw this. I saw that the shapes were moving in the pond. And I thought they moved because I was moving, but when I stood still they moved. And still I had trouble seeing. Though the shapes took on weight and muscle and definite form, it took my mind a long time to accept what I saw. The pond was full of ornamental carp. And they were large, larger than the carp I've seen in museum pools, large as trumpets, and so gold they were almost yellow. In circles, wide and small, the plated fish moved, and there were so many of them they could not be counted, though for a long time I tried to count them. And I thought of the man who owned the land standing where I stood. I thought of how years ago, in a fit of high madness or high faith, he must have planted the fish in the pond and then forgotten them, or been taken from them. But still the fish had grown, and still they thrived until they were many, and their bodies were fast and bright as coxcombs. I tore pieces of bread and threw them at the carp, and the carp leaped as I have not seen carp do before, and they fought each other for the bread. And they were not like fish, but like gulls or wolves, biting and leaping. Again and again I threw the bread. Again and again the fish leaped and wrestled. And below them, below the leaping fish, near the bottom of the pond, something slowly circled. A giant form that never rose to the bait and never came fully into view, but moved patiently in and out of the murky shadows. Out and in. I watched that form. And after the bread was gone, and after the golden fish had again grown quiet, my mind at last constructed a shape for it. And I saw for the space of 1 moment or two with perfect clarity, as if I held the heavy creature in my hands, the tarnished body of an ancient carp. A thing both fragrant and foul. A lily in a man's brain, bound together in one body. And then the fish was gone. He turned, and the shadows closed around him. The water grew blacker, and the steam rose from it, and the golden carp held still uncountable. And softly they burned, themselves like flowers, or like fruit blown down in an abandoned garden. It's such a powerful poem in so many ways, but what I love it is a poem for people. When you walk up to a community, the first thing that you see is all the snappers at the bread, right? The snappers at the bread. And you're looking for evidence of order and community, but then down there deep beneath the water, something else is circling. Something, I don't know if it's good or bad. It may not be a matter of good or bad. It may just be old or true or deep or rich or problematic. Like he's going into these synagogues, and here's this man with an unclean spirit, and instead of damning the man, he takes the unclean spirit out, and he's not harmed at all, and he sets that man free, right? Well, when you walk up to a pond, you can only see things from next to the pond for so long. And she sees more things than I could see when I go to Knott's Berry Farm and I lean over that fence, right? But Jesus sees even further into the water. And you guys know the rest of the story, and you know where I'm going to go with this. But before I do that, I want to show you one more quick fun thing. Oh, I lied. First, I'm going to tell you what I'm talking about in the story. And when he had finished speaking, Jesus said to Simon, who was fishing, remember, and cleaning his nets, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon answered, "Master, we toiled all night and took nothing, but at your word, I will let down the nets." A couple truths on this. In fact, let me read this again. I'm rushing too fast right now, and I need to breathe. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon answered, "Master, we toiled all night and took," how much? Nothing. "But at your word, I will let down the nets." I don't know if you've ever gone fishing or been a fisherman, but if you spent any time fishing, but a lot of times, especially when it's a lazy day and you just want to be there to relax, you don't really change up the plan much. You kind of fish the way you normally fish, and you do what you normally do. And Peter's saying what we just did was good enough. Simon Peter is saying that. Forgive me if every time I say Peter, I mean Simon, because it's the same guy, but forgive me if that's confusing. And here he's telling them, hey man, go out there and put out into the deep. This is what happens in the great Hemingway book, The Old Man of the Sea. He goes out to deeper water than he's ready to fish, and he catches the greatest fish that he's ever caught in his whole life. And the book is about his toil and his wrestle with trying to bring this fish in. And Jesus just got done healing people in an all-night healing session, proclaiming that the poor, the captive, the blind, the oppressed are the ones he wants to reach. What he is telling to these guys is the same old streams of fish, the same old things that you've been fishing in. That's all got to change. We're going to go deeper. We're going to get to people who are deeper down, buried with all the things they carry, not just the material things, but the psychosis and the struggle and the afflictions and the deep stuff, right? We are reluctant to go deep because it's frightening to go deep. It's more work to go deep. These guys got to drop their nets down deeper, and if they get a catch, it's going to be a longer and harder wrestling match to get those nets back up. And one of the things we always do to God and to others to keep from having to go deeper or to changing our routine is pitching them on how hard we've worked. Don't ask me to do something new. Look, I've worked hard all night and got nothing. I've tried that before. I got nothing. But remember in Capernaum, it was the word of Jesus that they amazed at. Do you remember that? And so right here he says, but at your word, I will let down the nets. Jesus' word has authority in Capernaum. These disciples are recognizing that authority, so they obey his word. We're always pitching everyone on how hard we work, but he is always calling us deeper. And we must cast out. If he calls you to go deeper and you don't cast out, that will harden your heart. It will blind your eyes, shrink your periphery, so you're less likely to see the next opportunity you have to go deeper. Because sometimes that call to go deeper is quiet and subtle. It happens like this, right? The best fishermen, the trout fishermen, guys, you guys know I'm a fly fisherman, and I'm not a great fly fisherman, but I can catch a fish. And I know enough to when I walk up to the river to not walk on any tree roots because the fish can hear that. The vibrations go through the tree roots into the water. And I know that if I'm going to fish, I got to fish upstream, not downstream, not be casting it downstream because then my fly will be flapping downstream in the current and will look fake. I got to cast it upstream. And I know also not to pitch it in the middle of the water where it's fast, but to look for little circles and pools of water where the water's kind of still. And then I got to cast it out there so that my line kind of hooks around so it goes a little bit upstream, but the fly falls in the pool, and so the line can kind of go like this and kind of shift around. And it gives me a little more time to tempt that fish to come up and to take that fly. And then when he takes the fly, my leader line, which is this little itty bitty, almost microscopic line, so that they don't see the fly and they don't see the fishing line, or they'll be frightened and they'll run away. It's very weak. So if they run on me, I have to let them run. I have to let the fish run and take the line, and then when they get tired, I reel them in. And then sometimes it takes a long time to get just a decent sized fish in because you really have to respect them or respect that process. It's harder fishing, but when you hold that fish in your hand, fly fishing is so rewarding. And the best thing about it that I love the most is that you're in the water. And some guys go even deeper in the water than I go. And I want to show you a video about some of these guys. I don't know if you've ever seen these guys before. You guys ever seen this before? You just said, hey, you hurt. Did you hear that? Alicia? That's called hogging in Illinois. In Oklahoma, it's called noodling. It's called different things in different spots. Native Americans did it. These guys get down, and these massive catfish that are never going to bite your line, they dig themselves down into these holes, and these guys go up in the holes, and they put their hands right into the hole, and they wiggle their fingers. And that catfish comes out and swallows their hand, and they lift them up. And he said right there, you hurt. You hurt, right? But these are the fish that are deepest down. I had a cousin by marriage who used to fish this way. And he used to say, Johnny, when we did it in a river that was moving pretty fast and pretty deep, so we put a net upstream and a net downstream, because if we didn't get them when we scared them at the hole, then maybe they go downstream and get caught in the net. And he said, but the danger with that is if you got even a button on your shirt or your pants caught in that net, you could die, because you would get dragged under. And he told me stories about how he had other guys stand on his back to keep him flat on the bottom of the river so he could stick his arm down into those holes and get those fish. There are disciple makers out there just like that. And I'm going to tell you a couple stories about guys like this at the end of the teaching. I'm going to kind of rant off a whole bunch of people that I think are just some of the most epic disciple makers alive or that I've ever known, all right? But they will go super deep to get these fish. And they'll go into water and into areas no one else is willing to fish. And I think we have a bunch of folks like that in our own church family, but I asked Alicia if she would read something to us that kind of shares her heart and the kind of the water that she's been called into and some of the deep the deep fishing she's been doing. So I'm actually going to have you come up here, if you don't mind, my friend, and do it into the microphone, and I'll just kind of step back. And Alicia's going to share with you a little bit of what God's called her to do.
I'm just going to read it straight.
Yeah, you got it. That'd be great.
I was inspired to start a ministry while visiting the Ventura jail, where I met a young mother whose husband was in jail. She looked so lost and devastated. The Lord put in my heart to pray for her. When her visit was over, I introduced myself and asked her if I could pray with her. She was so grateful. As she told me her story, my heart broke for her. I realized then that many women who have husbands, sons, and brothers feel very alone in their situations with an incarcerated family member, especially when it comes to those who are incarcerated for sex crimes. A very touchy and sensitive subject, a forgotten people when it comes to sharing God's love, grace, and forgiveness. The difficult task for them is dealing with the embarrassment and the quick judgment of others and the lack of grace toward them and the families. A mother cannot just stop loving her son, or a wife her husband, or a sister or brother, or a daughter and son their father. That's where they feel so alone and isolated, because when they share their many different situations, they feel judged harshly by the majority, including the church. Unfortunately, the majority of these crimes are normally done by those closest to the victims. It devastates families and can leave a lifetime of scars and shame they feel they can never escape. That's where the unmerited amount of grace, compassion, love, and forgiveness help the victims and the perpetrator to live without the judgment and opinions of others, and to live in the grace and the healing power of the pure, unconditional love of God. Then it is when you see the sweetness of humility come alive in a victim who is free to live and not be victimized for the rest of their lives. We serve an amazing, powerful God, and when we allow Him to move through us with His love, it is awesome. It's like standing on the side of Jesus and watching the power of His cleansing, healing, powerful blood wash the lost and hopeless with redemption, forgiveness, and hope. I have seen lives and families transformed before my own eyes. I am thankful to our Father for allowing me to walk amongst the lepers and see His touch heal them.
All right. Yeah, give it up. Alicia, to me, you're like one of these guys in these videos, man. You're like, you're down in the water. I'll just show you one more. Look at this one. It's so cool. Watch this. And there's the guy. Look at that. That's you, you know. You get right down. You get right down in the water, and you spend time with the ones who are hidden or feel that they need to hide away. And you're bringing them out and calling them out. And I love that about you. And and they finally do obey Jesus. They cast into the deeper water. And in Luke 5, 6, and 7, it says that when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both the boats so that they began to sink. I want to read that again. When they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both the boats so that they began to sink. And I've taught in this passage before, guys, so I don't want to be like redundant with this. But you know that I believe that these guys got selfish. That every fisherman in the first century knew their boats like the back of their hands. That's actually the back of my hand, sorry about that. And that when they start overloading their boats to the point where their boats begin to sink, what they're doing there is their appetite and the dollar signs are flashing. That's what they're thinking about. And that's why, I believe it's the next passage. Oh no, this is one of my guys. So let me go back before I rattle through these guys. And let me just give you the rest on this real quick. These guys are unifying around this, and they're all, it says they, so I'm going to read it as their boats all began to sink. And that's a crisis now. Now there's two things that happen here. The first thing is that they trusted Jesus, and what happened? Got fish. They got the greatest catch of fish maybe they've ever gotten, by going deeper. And I am going to argue that it's going deeper. I know that different commentators have different views on that, but it says go into the deeper water, go cast deeper. They cast and they get this huge haul of fish. The nets are breaking, the boats are sinking, the fish are exploding, and There are some guys in my life that have been great fishermen, and they have followed Jesus' call. And by guys, I mean that gender neutral, men and women. I mean, Alicia's one of them. They have followed Jesus' call to go out and to fish in a particular part of the water. And they have been blessed when they've done that. And I want to just talk through a little bit for you, these guys. This is one of those guys. I already put his picture up. You all know who that is. That's Pastor Ron Salisbury. Sonny Salisbury's brother. Sonny and Ron have been huge mentors to me. Ron passed away this summer. Ron went wherever God called. He went up to a church in the desert and rocked that church. Went up to another church in Pismo in a beach community and rocked that church. And by rock that church, I don't mean like, I'm kind of being Johnny and just being oversimplified in my language. He went up there though and he fished where God called him to fish. And that included with me. He poured into me. He knew that I was like the organic church guy that wanted to go out to parks and coffee shops and do all this stuff. He knew exactly who I was and he poured into me, and it made a huge impact in my life, all right? This is another guy I have huge respect for, to kind of go back in history. This is William Wilberforce, all right? Nobody is more responsible for the ending of slavery in Europe than William Wilberforce. If you don't know his story, his pastor was John Newton, who wrote the song Amazing Grace, who was a slave ship captain for 20 years. He saw 20,000 slaves passed under his care in 20 years, and they haunted every one of his steps until God brought him to the light. He confessed, he was broken, he repented, and it got to the place where he really believed the blood of slaves was on him and their voices in his ears 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it haunted him. He's very powerfully portrayed in the movie Amazing Grace, if you don't know anything about John Newton. He doesn't get a lot of screen time, but the time he gets is super powerful, and he was Wilberforce's pastor. And Wilberforce said to him, I believe God's calling me into the ministry, and he shouted at him. He said, no, you got to stay in politics. You got to end the slave trade. And he used the phrase, you've got to take my story, because Newton wrote a story, and use it to blow their ships out of the water. What he's saying there is go into deeper water that crosses continents. Go down deep, man. Love people you're not even going to meet this week at the dadgum pub. They live on the other side of the planet. They live in America, where King George is losing his mind and saying he can see America through his telescope, and America's revolting, and there's a revolution going on, and don't worry about any of that stuff. Go after these folks to save these folks. And you know what? He was one of the best speakers in Parliament. And what's awesome about his story, and this is just a little tangent, but something for you to chew on. With all of his speeches, he never was able to illegalize slavery. Not until he found a quieter approach. At that time, slave ships could throw up the American flag and nobody could board them. It didn't matter if they're American or not. They could just throw it up and nobody could board them. So he passed a bill that made that illegal. So the British naval vessels could board any privateer they wanted to board. And he had the most boring guy in Parliament introduce the bill. Well, I'm here today. I'm not going to do my British accent or Amanda will bag on me. So, though it's not that bad, as bad as she says it is. This guy put everybody to sleep. They got the bill passed, and overnight, 80% of all slave trading ended. And 2 years later, it was illegal and eradicated from England, who was the largest purchaser and mover of slaves in the world at that time.
Glory to God.
Fascinating story, incredible faithfulness. All right, and then I mentioned to you guys a narrative story, which is Friday Night Lights earlier, and I want to show you one quick clip from Friday Night Lights, and I have to set it up with a fun kind of football scene, all right? This is Coach Taylor, who's based off a real coach who coached at a high school in West Texas. The story of this high school is so inspirational that they made a fictionalized version of his life story, and it was the syndicated show Friday Night Lights. And his top quarterback that he's mentored has gone out of the game with a severe injury, and they don't know how severe it is. And he's had to put in this little kid, backup quarterback, in the game. And the first thing he does is he throws the ball, it hits the back of the helmet of the guy in front of him. All right. But then the adrenaline rises, and they're going to the end of the game. And if he loses a game, it could literally ruin his coaching career. It's the way it is in Texas. And so then this happens.
475. We got a chance to do this.
What a story, young Matt Saracen bringing his team back into the ballgame. He dropped back to pass now. Banks with the answer. The statue of the Christ goes for the
he is able to make the game-winning touchdown catch, all right? And it's kind of like Peter going out into deeper water, Simon Peter, and bringing in that huge catch, if you're kind of following my logic here, okay? But the coach freaks out because the next day the sun rises up and he realizes he has a kid for a quarterback and they have to win again next week. So he goes up and he visits the quarterback who got injured, Jason Street, who he mentored from when he was a little boy, poured his life into this kid, built him into the greatest quarterback the high school world had ever seen. And I want to show you that clip. It's only 90 seconds. And I want you to listen to the wisdom that comes out of this young man. I may need help in the volume, too. Come on. Just notice every image, too. It's a brilliantly put together clip. Good.
Not really feeling too much right now. Guys, I want the guy to sign it up for you. Yeah. They all say hello. Reagan signed that? Reagan signed it, everyone signed it. When did you teach him how to write his name? I just scrawled on it, he didn't really. It's really nice, Coach. Yes, sir, down here. Thank you. Yeah, so. Look, I don't think anyone needs to tell you, but you know we're saving your spot over there. You know, whatever it takes, however long it takes. Really, how's Thursday doing? Thursday's doing fine. He's throwing like a girl, but he's doing fine. He's doing fine. Take some time. You know, I was kind of like that kid. You know? He's a lot different than me. He doesn't need a roadmap like I do, I think. He's kind of creative. You know? This is Bob Dylan. Draws pictures and stuff. I don't know, he's a good kid. I think you free him up a little bit out there on that field. He'll make some things happen for you. You're a good man. You're a good man. You're what makes guys like me want to coach. You are a good man. I'm sorry if I let you down. Let the team down. Yeah, son, you didn't let me down. You did not let me down.
You know, this clip is dangerous for me to even talk about because there's so much truth in it. He's walking up to visit his all-star quarterback who's paralyzed now, and what's he bring with him but a football and a kickstand, right? Because he only knows how to think about people in one way. And I want to challenge you with this. You struggle with this too. You listen to me. You may be awesome in a couple of the 5 love languages, but you're probably not awesome with them all. I know I'm not. And sometimes in the people we've poured into more than anybody else, a life change happens. Something gets shaken up, and we've got to show some agility. And here The paralyzed kid in the bed becomes the coach to the coach. And the coach is telling him, we're saving your spot, man. We're saving your spot. We're going to get back to the glory days. We're going to get back to the glory. And he finally just interrupts him and says, how's Saracen doing? How's the kid doing? Hey, man, he's creative. He's not like me. He likes to try different things. See him. Know what kind of music he listens to. Know what he does in his hobby. See him. And then pour into him and pour into him and pour into him. Stop being so attracted by the fruit that you have with me that you won't spend the time with that deep fish that you need to spend. Go deeper. That's what Chitwood did for me, guys. Michael Chitwood, I know you guys hear a lot about him, but he saw me, he poured into me, he pulled me up, gave me an opportunity with World Vision, and God has done incredible stuff. But the bottom line is, it was never him speeching me like some guy on a podium. He saw me, he talked to me, he heard me, and he poured into me. That's what's happened in a Black Coffee where Lindsay now works. Jason Mitchell, the head of Black Coffee, is mentoring guys straight out of prison. Some of these guys have done 10 years, 20 years for violent crimes. He's giving them jobs. He's mentoring them. He's pouring into them. And what's the result? They're becoming like Jesus because they're spending time with Jason. And in the end, he doesn't centralize himself as the central personality. He gets these guys out there discipling other guys and discipling other guys. And that's what Neil does. My friend Neil Cole, whom all of you know. This is him baptizing one of Jason's guys in a pickup truck lined with a tarp. Can you make that out? Dude, that picture is stinking awesome. They took a hose out and they filled up the tarp with water. And right nearby, this happening, they got grief from some Christians for how they were going about baptizing somebody. And I'm not going to get into that whole story. But here's what I want to say to you right now. You stop worrying about how other Christians call you and measure you. You do what Jesus has called you to do. I release you from that, for that, to that, for that purpose. I've gone a little over my time here, but I want you to hear me on this. Because look at this last thing, man. Look at this scripture. When Simon Peter saw that they were sinking all their own boats, he fell down at Jesus' knees saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." And you look at what Jesus says to him. For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching men." And when they had brought their boats to land, guess what? They bailed on all of that. Left everything and followed him. And you know why? Because they were caught up in some spiritual movement. Listen to me, man. There is nothing more awesome in life than being Coach Taylor, guys. When you've made an impact like that in somebody's life, it is awesome. Stop being picky about who you work with. Jesus wasn't. Simon even told him, "Get away from me," and he would not do it. Instead, he pressed in closer. And Peter became one of the great leaders in the early church. Stop being picky. Let the love of Jesus just get you to pour into these others. Give them the best you got. And giving them the best you got is not what makes them disciples. But when you're giving them the best you got, it's this magic thing that kind of Jesus' power and love enters into, and he knows that if he does something here, it's not going to get wasted or forgotten. He's going to move. That's why we got to pray. That's why we got to seek God's face. We got to pour ourselves into pour Scripture into us and pour Scripture into one another. And we got to remember that because of the cross, there is no sin that can hold us back anymore. Nothing can hold us back. That's it. End of teaching. We're going to end a little bit different tonight. I'm going to ask you to hit that button. I'm going to ask that we circle up. Claudia, we're going to always move the circle towards you, so because we don't want you to have to stand. You need to stand. That's my hook. That's sometimes I do that. I get the hand and I hook them. Bring them in. Yep. Get up in. Get up in. The magic words are, "That's me." Yeah, come on in, brother. The magic words are, "That's me," or "Please God." If something tonight spoke to you, I'm going to give you a chance to respond. If you don't know who your Matt Saracen is right now, you're out of time. You need to be praying about that at the end of the day and the beginning of the day, because otherwise, who are you discipling? If you've been driven or shepherded by fear, out of time with that. Fear has kept you slave your whole life. We're going to let fear go. So I'm going to pray. I'm going to ask some questions, give you a chance to respond. The reason why we're circling up and not doing some altar call or seats down here is because I thought we just need to be connected with one another. We can't do this alone. You know what I'm saying? We need each other. So let's bow our heads and let's pray. Hold your hand right here. I don't want you to lose your... Okay, good. Heavenly Father, I come before you right now just with all the passion in my heart, God. I remember Mike Schoonover, God, who stinking was waiting in his 65 Falcon convertible on the other side of the fence. I was jumping over to ditch school so he could grab me instead of me going off on my own and getting in trouble with some girl or some other situation. He could take me and disciple me. I remember Tip LaBelle Sanders, the security guard at the school, pouring prayers into me and teaching me how to weightlift, God. I remember Coach Mack, who made a huge impact on my life. I remember, God, people down through the years who were there for me. They drove to my house. They found me. They were there for me, God. And God, so many of us, we think about all the times nobody drove to my house. And Father, I'm asking tonight, will you speak to us about the homes we're not driving to? If that speaks to you right now, church, I want you to say, "Please God," or "That's me, God." Father, I pray that you allow us to be free from feeling like our phones are our primary bridge into other people's lives. That's you. Say so. Father, I pray right now that you give broken-hearted passion in every heart in the circle to reach out and connect with somebody that they're being picky about. If you're being picky, would you just say, "That's me"? I'm so proud of you for saying that. Because, man, I've been picky too, guys. I do it too. God, will you just open our eyes? The fish are in the water. We just got to go deeper. And we don't have to be afraid of going deeper because the older, bigger fish are down there, but we have the Holy Spirit that can cast out anything that we confront, not by our might or strength or power or wisdom, but by your sovereign grace and love. If you'll do something about it this week, maybe even by first step, inviting them to come and volunteer with you this week, and will you say, "That's me"? Will you do something this week with us, God? Will you give us an opportunity to make a difference, to not be pushed off? People are rolling their eyes or acting surprised to hear from us, not putting it on them to get us to keep reaching out to them. But we're going to do it because you've called us to do it. That's what you did for us. It's in